All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. It's 3 o'clock sharp, so we'll make a start. Thank you very much for convening. I'd like to just introduce my colleagues and panelists this afternoon who'll be discussing with us maintenance in a sectional title scheme. So once again, we have Karine Kutsia calling in from our Cape Town branch, and Karine is a sectional title and community scheme management specialist. We have Adele Ulefia, our Pretoria branch manager, who will be presenting a number of slides. Adele has more than 20 years experience with sectional title management. And then we have Sean Swindon, a colleague based in our Johannesburg branch. Sean is an operations manager and is currently working on a significant project to do detailed inspections of all of the Johannesburg building properties, the sectional title and homeowners properties, which he'll talk about during the session. Just a reminder that today is the third in our series of training sessions. We started off with the sectional title definitions in the first module. The second one last week was on HR topics and important matters to consider for sectional title employees. Today we have maintenance and important health and safety considerations. And then just a preview to next week, we have sectional title insurance. So we'll be covering all the pertinent facts and considerations about sectional title cover and how claims are managed in sectional title buildings. By all means, please raise any questions on this topic or any of the last two meetings if you'd like. We'll do our best to answer those. Please do email me if you would like a copy of the slides or the webinar link, which we'll upload tomorrow to YouTube. It's not straightforward to export and copy the chat email addresses. So I think some people last week asked on the Q&A for the slides to be sent through. I wasn't able to copy those because I was busy with trying to track and answer the questions. So the last slide are contact details. And if you wouldn't mind emailing me if you would like copies of the slides or the link, I'll gladly do it tomorrow once we have the recording uploaded. If anyone was missed last week, please send me the details and I can easily email any of the last few presentations and links as well. And if you would like it each and every week, let me know and I can diarize to send it on a weekly basis. All right, so that's the introduction out the way. Karine, I'm going to hand over to you to move on with some of the important definitions, legal parameters, and considerations of case studies for sectional title maintenance. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. So basically the first thing that we're going to look at, remember the first session that we had an introduction to sectional title and the terminology. And I said we will look at it again. So we're basically looking at, again, the definition and the distinction between what is a section and what is common property. So as you can see on the slide, there is a dotted or broken green line that is surrounding that unit. So that dotted or broken line is basically what we call the median line. It runs through the middle of the floor, the middle of the walls, and the middle of the ceiling. And that dotted line is the distinction between what is section and what is common property. Everything below that line or inside that line, inside from the walls, down from the ceiling, up from the floors, inside that line is what is called the section. And everything on the outside, which is shown on this picture with the red, is the common property. So you will see that the outside wall is common property. The foundation is common property. And everything above the ceiling in the roof and the roof itself, that is common property. So normally a geyser is situated in the roof, and the geyser is then situated on common property. But in terms of the sectional title legislation, the owner remains responsible for the geyser. The owner remains responsible for everything inside his section, as well as the geyser, and the body corporate is responsible for everything on the common property. So I hope that is a nice clear distinction, but I'm going to go into some case studies for you as well with regards to actual maintenance queries that we get and how to differentiate between this. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So basically we have, in this case study, we've got a unit with a balcony. And that is what we are going to be basing our 3 different scenarios on. So you'll see that this could be on the 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 24th floor, doesn't matter. We have a simple unit that has a balcony as well. So if we can go to the next slide, which is our scenario number 1. In all these scenarios, the owner basically contacts us and say that there's a leak in the balcony, or the unit below contacts us and say there's a leak coming from upstairs. And we look at the plans, we see that it's a balcony. We look at the unit, we see it's a balcony. So we look at the plans in the first scenario and we see that that balcony is part of that section. So it's included in the floor area of the section. And therefore it is important to note that then maintenance of the balcony will be for the owner's account. Because remember, I said the median line, it's inside the median line, it's part of the section. So maintenance will be for the owner's account. If you look at windows and doors, it depends on where they're situated. If they're situated on that line that separates the unit and the balcony. Thank you, Adele. If the windows or doors are situated there, it's still part of the section. So it's still the responsibility of the owner as it's inside the section. If there's the balcony has been enclosed with windows or glass or whatever, and the windows sitting on that wall there, on the outside, then it will be 50-50 between the owner and the body corporate who's responsible for maintenance. So it depends on where the window and door is situated, and it depends on the status of the balcony. So that's the first scenario where the balcony is part of the section, it's the owner's responsibility. Second scenario, another unit, so same simple unit with a balcony, but we checked the plans and we saw that the balcony is actually common property. It is actually not included in the unit's floor area. It's not part of their PQ. It is common property. Then we need to note that the maintenance will be for the body corporate's account, because remember, common property, always body corporate. So then if there is a window in that line between the unit and the balcony, it will be 50-50 between the body corporate and the owner, because the unit is section and the balcony is common property. So that's basically that scenario. And then the last scenario is where the balcony is an exclusive use area. So it is common property, but there's exclusive use rights linked to it. It's not part of the section. We've checked the plans and we've seen that. So we have to check the plans as well as the rules to determine this. If it's exclusive use in terms of the plans that we can see on the sectional plan, then the body corporate will be responsible for maintenance of that balcony, and they must charge an exclusive use levy to cover that maintenance. If it's exclusive use in terms of the rules, it could either be the conduct rules or the management rules, doesn't matter. But if it's exclusive use in terms of the rules have to say who's responsible for maintenance. If the rules state that the owner is responsible for maintenance, then the body corporate cannot also charge an exclusive use area levy. If the rules don't say anything about maintenance, then the body corporate will be responsible for maintenance of that balcony, and the body corporate must charge an exclusive use levy for it. So I don't know if there's any questions up to now.
No questions, Kelly.
No question. Okay, then we can go on to the next slide. So our next case study, we've got a block of flats here. We've got section 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the owner of section 3 contacted us and said there is water coming through from upstairs. What should be done? Whose responsibility is it? So if you look at that picture there, unfortunately it doesn't have the pretty colors of the first one, but there's still the median line that separates the two sections. And in this case, there's between two sections, there's no common property. From the median line upwards is section 1, and from the median line downwards is section 3. And the same between section 1 and 2. From the median line left is section 1, and from the median line right is section 2. So you see there's no common property involved there, so there's no body corporate responsibility. So the matter will be between the two owners. So if there's a leak from section 1 downwards into section 3, then it will be between the two owners. Obviously, we can assist with that, but we need to then find out and see what is it. Is it the bath there's a leak under the bath that's running through? Is it a washing machine that's leaking water and it's running through to the unit below? we should check all of that. But normally in an instance like this, it will be the responsibility of the owner of Section 1 to fix the damage. And it needs to be looked at the body corporate insurance to see if it covers the resultant damage of that after the repairs have been done. But the repairs first have to be done. And the household contents is also normally not covered by the body corporate insurance. So that is a different claim altogether. So that is basically my case studies.
Karine, these are such important and common occurrences in a sectional title building. I think that's why you started with these as important case studies. And once again, it goes down to what is the nature of the area that's affected, and therefore who is responsible for the repair and cost of that repair. So we've had a question which maybe you can talk about as a second or as a secondary case study. So let's say there's water leaking from an upstairs balcony into a downstairs balcony. Who then is responsible to sort this out and to pay for the cost? So a leak, and the leak has then damaged the painting of the downstairs balcony ceiling, which then needs to be painted once the waterproofing upstairs is fixed. So how would you think through that common scenario, and how should it be sorted out?
Okay, so that takes us back to the first case study that I basically did. So the first thing we have to do is we have to determine the status of that balcony, the upstairs balcony. We have to determine the status and see, is it part of the section, which is scenario 1? Is it common property, which is scenario 2? Or is it an exclusive use area, which was scenario 3? So in order to determine that, we will look at the sectional plans, because that will show us if it's part of the section, or if it's common property, or if it's exclusive use in terms of the plans. And we also have to check the rules to see if it's maybe exclusive use in terms of the rules. And then we go back to our slides and we see in which scenario does it fit and who's then responsible for maintenance.
Okay, that's great. Karine, I'm going to ask you two questions that have come through. The one is, if there's furniture inside a unit that is damaged because of a leak from upstairs, who is responsible for replacing and repairing the furniture?
If it's not covered by the body corporate insurance or the owner's household insurance, then it would be the upstairs owner that caused the damage where the leak was coming from, that would be responsible for that.
Okay, so we will be going into detail next week on sectional title insurance, but a quick analogy is that if a unit was turned upside down, all the contents which would fall to the floor would not be covered by the sectional title insurance. So the sectional title insurance will only cover fixtures. So that is everything that doesn't fall. So the walls, the light fittings, anything that's fixed to the wall would be covered, and covered with resultant damage cover if there was a leak from upstairs. But typically an owner, a resident, would be expected to have contents insurance, short-term insurance, to cover their goods and movable goods inside the unit. So hopefully that's an answer for that one. Karine, if the unit above is leaking and water damages the unit underneath, who must fix the resultant damage in the downstairs flat?
Yeah, as I said, that would be the responsibility of where the leak is coming from. So it would be the upstairs owner if it's not covered by insurance.
Okay. All right. So maybe just to emphasize, I think the sectional plans and the conduct rules and the management rules actually are critical documents that all sectional title caretakers should have on file and available to them. And it would be really important as part of orientation and part of being aware what each different area of the building is, whether it's part of sections, part of exclusive use areas, or the common property, all of which is defined in the sectional plans. And it would be a very good idea for all caretakers to be very clear on that, because as you can see, the designation of that property area defines who is responsible for arranging the repairs and who's responsible for paying for the repairs. If anybody's not sure, then they should reach out to their portfolio manager or one of their trustees to walk through the complex with them with the sectional plans and to double check what format or what designation each area of the sectional title scheme is. That would be very good awareness, and it would certainly help in terms of managing maintenance and allocating the responsibility for that. So really, really important that you've got that clarity and you've got those source documents to be able to navigate. And as you can hear, all of these common scenarios, which we see each and every day in the complexes we're involved with, goes back to, is it common property? Is it exclusive use? What is said in the rules about exclusive use, or do the exclusive use areas appear in the plans, or is it part of the section? And then once you know that, it's basically quite simple from there. We're really hoping that, caretakers are able to give the right advice to owners and residents when these sort of maintenance issues are reported, because it's much quicker if an older owner is told up front that the maintenance cost is their responsibility because it's inside their section. If they can be told that right at the outset very quickly, it certainly accelerates the timing to get the problem solved. It creates the correct expectation up front, and it's certainly the professionalism that would be ideal for a caretaker to be able to achieve. So, that's what we're hoping, and that's part of the reason for these training series, is to make sure that we are equipping sectional title caretakers with the correct information, the necessary knowledge, and the correct supporting documents that they are able to give the right feedback to residents at square one. And then by all means, the portfolio manager would be a point of call or an escalation if there was any concern for that. We're getting quite a few questions about sort of very similar type of maintenance scenarios. So I think we'll move on, but I'll read through the questions and we can come back to any slightly different scenarios towards the end of the presentation. So hopefully that does give you some fairly clear guidelines and common scenarios to assist with on-site. Right, Adele, I think we can go on. Thank you. Right. I'd like us to discuss now three very important health and safety considerations in terms of maintenance, which caretakers can certainly play a very key role in supervising and overseeing and making sure that these are covered. The first is fire equipment, and most buildings, sectional title buildings, would have a mix of fire hose reels, fire extinguishers, and potentially other fire equipment as well. And there's a legal requirement that this equipment is inspected and serviced on an annual basis. So you will all have seen on the fire equipment in your buildings that there should be a sticker which will show the last service date and the next service date required for that fire equipment. And it would be a very good idea if yourselves as caretakers would check on this and make sure that the fire equipment is serviced before the expiry, and that you escalate to the portfolio manager or trustees if there is going to make sure that it's done on time. So making sure that it's up to date and done on time is critically important in terms of health and safety management at a complex, and is certainly a top priority management requirement. The managing agent would assist obviously with getting quotes, getting approvals with the trustees, booking the contractors, and then we'll talk just now about how caretakers can get involved in terms of on-site support for maintenance to be done as time efficiently as possible. Just a reminder that the fire equipment does need a major service every 5 years, and on an annual basis, it would be a minor service. The difference with a major service, I believe, is that the contents of powder acceptor would be typically emptied and refilled, whereas every year they would just be weighing the items and doing pressure tests and checking the fire hose reels for leaks and just functionality. It's also important that a fire register is completed and updated and provided to the managing agent, so that on an annual basis before expiry, the managing agent should be able to have a firefighting compliance certificate, a fire register of where all the fire equipment is located, and that same information needs to be provided to the sectional title insurers so they have proof that the fire equipment has been checked and serviced and it is certified has been checked and up to date. So a really, really important sort of focus area, and, you know, critical that, you know, if there was a fire in a sectional title building and the fire equipment was not correctly serviced and up to date, there could be a repudiation on any damages that arise, and, you know, liability on the part of the trustees and the body corporate. So it's not difficult to keep this up to date. It's not difficult to keep an eye on this, and therefore a very important focus area for sectional title caretakers. I would also recommend that with the daily common property inspections, that an eye is kept that all the fire equipment is in place. Unfortunately, this equipment has a habit of being stolen for scrap metal purposes and recycling purposes. So fire equipment does have a habit of going missing. So it does need to be checked. And if a fire extinguisher does go missing, that would need to be reported to the managing agents to arrange a replacement. And also the fire hose reels have a habit of being used for washing cars or for obtaining water, or especially if there's an interruption to the complex, sometimes the fire system is still functional, and that leads to difficulties with the seal being broken and also potentially with the valves being broken. So it's important that the fire hoses are also sort of inspected on a daily basis. If there are any leaks, that should be reported to be repaired, and certainly residents should be encouraged and advised they should not interfere with the fire equipment unless in the case of a fire emergency, because otherwise the equipment can be damaged. So those are all important considerations to bear in mind for fire equipment and supervising and inspecting the fire equipment on site. Next topic I'd like to mention is the electric fence. So this is a really important security installation. There was a new regulation passed in the last couple of years that for every sectional title unit transfer, the conveyancing attorneys are required to have an electric compliance certificate for the electric fence. So for this reason, we've been trying to make sure that we have valid and current compliance certificates for all electric fences at complexes. So we are in a position to provide these to the conveyancing attorneys and to make sure that there's no delay in the transfer of units where the compliance certificate is required. It's also obviously important that the electric fence is compliant in terms of electrics to make sure that it works and that it works reliably and consistently. And also a good practice is that the voltage in the electric fence should be checked at least on a weekly basis, we would say, by the security service providers that often have a voltmeter to test that. Otherwise, potentially the complex should obtain one that it can be tested by the caretaker. But really important to measure it, to check it, and to make sure that it stays functional, because with plants or trees growing into the electric fences, they do get damaged, the voltage does get impacted, and, you know, we found very often that where electric fences are not checked, they become dysfunctional, nobody knows about it, and they obviously don't then perform the security function that they're required to perform. So a very important legal requirement, a very important health and safety requirement, especially relating to security. Then the third important topic I'd like to refer to, and this would not apply to all sectional title buildings, obviously only those with lifts, but buildings with lifts are required to have a lift Annexure B inspection conducted at least every 2 years. So every 2 years, the certificate will expire, and then it's necessary to appoint a registered lift inspector. These lift inspectors are registered with the Department of Labor, I believe. So they're certified, they are qualified and registered, and only they are then authorized to inspect lifts. And they are then required to issue a Annexure B certificate so that at any point in time, a lift has a valid Annexure B certificate. And there should be a copy left in the lift motor room, and another copy should be on file with the managing agent, and potentially also in a caretaker's file in an office if there is one available. So that's really important. How this typically works is that the lift inspector would be booked to conduct an Annexure B inspection. An indicative price for that would be in the region of R2,500 per lift. Once again, not anyone can inspect the lift. It has to be somebody registered with the Department of Labour. Typically, this is somebody independent of the lift service company, so it's not the lift service company doing the inspection, that's an independent inspector. The inspector will then go through a standard checklist, which is a legal requirement, and very often they will find what they call annexure items or inspection items that need to be repaired to then achieve a clear or clean Annexure B inspection. So these are repair items which need to be covered. Often it's a mix of building items, for example, lights in the motor room or lights in the shaft, potentially cleaning in the shaft. There could be issues with the door frames, etc. Fire extinguishers in the motor room are often other items concerned, and technical issues with the lift. So very often there needs to be work done by the building, which are so-called building remedial items, and then lift service remedial items, and those need to be inspected and completed within 60 days of the inspection to then achieve a clear or clean inspection, and the lift inspector would then issue an Annexure B certificate on the back of those remedial items being completed. That would then achieve the compliance requirements of the lift Annexure Bs, and again, that would need to be repeated on a 2-yearly basis. One of the challenges we see is that very often if lifts are old or they're not well maintained, the inspection items which are picked up at the Annexure B inspections can be sort of extensive, and the costs to the repair can be very high indeed, and very often the building is not budgeted to repair these items because they're not aware of what they might be and what the cost could be at the point of budgeting. So we sometimes find there delays in completing the remedial works because of cost, because they were unbudgeted, and very often because the trustees are uncomfortable, approving these because they're not aware in advance. A reminder again, if the repairs are not done within the 60 days stipulated from the original inspection, a whole nother inspection has to be done. So one needs to then go through a re-inspection and the same process again, which obviously then duplicates the inspection cost, which should then be avoided as far as possible. So it's really important that these repairs are project managed time efficiently within 60 days from the initial inspection to make sure that no further inspection costs are incurred and that it's done time efficiently. So hopefully that covers it. If some of you have seen an Annexure A referred to with lifts before, the Annexure A certificate is the one that's issued when the lift is first commissioned and handed over. So new lifts, as they are handed over, the installer or the lift service company will provide an Annexure A, which is the certificate that confirms the completed installation of a new lift. And Annexure B needs to be done at the same time as well with the new lift installation, and then every 2 years going forward, as I mentioned. So that's the difference between an Annexure A and an Annexure B certificate. Another important point to mention is if a lift has been decommissioned, if it's not working in the building, and therefore the lift is not in use, that could be a reason then to not require Annexure B certificates every 2 years. But it's really important that the lift is safely decommissioned. And part of that means that the lift needs to be lowered to the ground floor, and the lift needs to be made safe by a lift service company, because it's not satisfactory for the lift to be left on a higher floor because the ropes could rust, the ropes are not being maintained and greased and inspected, and there's a risk then that the ropes could rust through and the lift could come crashing down to the ground floor and could cause structural damages and potential injuries. So really important, if a lift is not in use, it must be made safe, it must be signed off as decommissioned safely, and that would take any liability away from the building and the trustees. So another important reminder concerning lifts. So these are 3 really important health and safety and insurance related topics as well, which all caretakers should be aware of. They should all take a role in supervising these and making sure that they are monitored and correctly achieved at a sectional title building, that there's no lapses, that there's no gaps, that there's no delays. And I think that would be an indicator of a well-managed and a safely managed building, which is really important to achieve. Okay. Adele, I'm going to ask you to continue. There might be some questions on that topic, but we can certainly come back to it. Sorry, I was going to do the slide as well. Sorry, just to move on quite quickly. As you might know, the new legislation has required an insurance valuation to be done every 3 years. So every 3 years, a professional insurance valuer is required to inspect the building. They will do an insurance valuation report. That report is a legal requirement, as I said, and it's also used to double check that the insurance cover for the building is correctly configured, is correctly matched to the requirements, and that the correct values are applied to that insurance cover. Just to note that the value that is defined in terms of insurance replacement is totally different to a sale value. So if you added up the potential sale price of all of the units, it would be below the insurance replacement value. And the difference would be that the replacement value includes demolition costs, rubble removal, the professional team and construction costs to rebuild the complex, and also alternative accommodation for residents while the complex has been rebuilt. So those would be the difference in terms of the insurance cover and the sale price, combined sale price of all the sections. But insurance is a legal requirement. It's mandatory in terms of the sectional title legislation. This is prescribed in terms of the 3-yearly valuation, and it's also a good idea to make sure the building is correctly insured and that there's no risk of underinsurance or averages being applied to claims. And we'll talk about this further next week as well. I'd like to emphasize the safety of swimming pools. I think we talk about it a lot, but it's absolutely essential that we double check that all the necessary safety equipment and disclaimer signage is correctly in place in those complexes with pools. Very sadly, we were involved with a complex a few years ago where there was a drowning, which is a terrible tragedy that needs to be avoided at all costs. And if these health and safety requirements are not correctly in place, there certainly is legal liability for the trustees as well as for the complex as well. They're not difficult to achieve, but they require attention to detail. They require checking by caretakers, and Trafalgar will also be making sure that our building inspections, which we will hopefully be done twice a year, will cover and check all of these items. So the important ones to remember are that there should be a disclaimer sign at the pool indicating that swimming is at the resident's own risk, that children over a certain age would need to be supervised, and potentially there would be opening hours for pools to operate. So a disclaimer sign, really, really important. There should be a fence around the pool. There should be a gate with a double latch and a spring closer. There should be a net, and there should be a life buoy as well. These would be the standard safety features. Remembering that there are different bylaws in different areas which prescribe the specific safety requirements as well. There's no reason one couldn't have extra or additional safety equipment, but certainly the minimum safety requirements are outlined in the bylaws, and it would be a very good idea for the trustees, for caretakers, for the portfolio team to be fully aware of what these requirements are. And we deem it so important that we are double checking all of these features with swimming pools with our building inspections that are underway. So really important to keep in mind safety and these features with swimming pools if there are swimming pools in the complexes that you manage. Last point from my side is the tenure maintenance plans. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we'll cover these potentially in a later webinar, but just to say for now that the new sectional title legislation does prescribe a tenure maintenance plan for sectional title buildings. There are specialist service providers that put these together. These are presented at the AGM, and they map out the preventative maintenance required at buildings over a 10-year period, and they are then updated on an annual basis. Caretakers could very well pick up issues and items that need to be either included in the tenure maintenance plan or updated in the tenure maintenance plan, and that would be important feedback to give to either your trustees or the portfolio team so they are aware of those and that they certainly take that into account when the tenure maintenance plan is updated. We will talk about it in more detail, and we might have some questions on that to come. So Adele, thank you if you could carry on with the next slides. Or Sean, sorry, it's Sean's topic.
Yeah, so it's Sean.
Just unmute Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Just to touch on the subject, which is rather important on all the sites. Obviously, it's cost related and reflects directly back onto your budget. So there are different kinds of maintenance. There's ones that we talk about daily, which is like your ad hoc maintenance and your planned maintenance. But a lot of the times, the caretakers and trustees or our clients forget about preventative maintenance. So there's also another section, which is operative maintenance, but I'll get to that later. So preventative maintenance, just as an example, starting at the top of the slide, you have gutters. So on top of carports, which is mostly the biggest offender, you find with low-hanging branches nearby and stuff, leaves are allowed to collect inside of those gutters. And if they're not cleared, it will cause blockages inside the gutter, which then leads blockages on the downpipes, and a collection and accumulation of water or moisture, which in turn causes corrosion. And in a very short amount of time, in a year or two, you're looking at replacement costs to replace the actual gutters, because eventually they just rust and they fall apart. The same, in a different way, a different form of maintenance, and what I alluded to earlier, in operative maintenance, I refer to the next point on the slide, which is drains. Now, your stormwater drains on the site are one of the most least inspected items in the whole building. Now, what I mean by that is, if you go to one of your a lot of the sites are very clean, but a lot of them, the majority of them, if you go to your stormwater drains right now, you'll find a collection of leaves, debris, litter, those kind of things. And over a year or so, that collects, and in your dry season, obviously it's a lot dustier and there's sand in there as well. That could also lead to blockages in the drainage system under the roads, and which could lead to you having to unblock those. So on at least a weekly and sometimes even monthly, you would want to get inside the gutters, on top of the gutters. And I wouldn't suggest going higher than first floor level. If you're going to go higher, second floor, then you would have to reach out to a reputed gutter company or a high level cleaning company. There are a number of those where you have to use rope access or ladder systems with fastening devices onto the side of the buildings. Leads me on to the next item, which is the municipal meters. A lot of the sites that I'm visiting, I've noticed that the pavement area is like a no man's land. There is a complete, I dare to say, disconnect between council and the actual client, where the client is waiting for council to come and clear up the area, and then some clients will do it themselves. I personally, my suggestion would be pay attention to your pavement area, because it's in the best interest of you as a client to sweep the verges, make sure the landscaping is done, and most importantly, the meter cavity where the actual water meter is stored. Most of the older buildings, the meters are still subsurface, where what I mean is there's a hole in the ground with a cover, with a lid, which is over the duct. Those fill up quickly with sand. I've seen on one or two of buildings that I've been to where the actual structure of the duct, the road, the movement on the road has actually pushed the duct, the walling around that into itself, and it's collapsed, which is in turn covered the meter. And the caretaker is basically just clearing the glass area where the reading can be done. But what I would suggest is to make sure that on at least a monthly basis, go and have a look inside those boxes, make sure all the sand is removed, make sure all the leaves are removed, so that when the council inspector comes or meter reader comes to inspect, that there is no excuses for reading an accurate reading, which obviously has a knock-on effect if you receive your count at the end of the month. Daily common property inspections. It's to walk around and just look for things that are out of the ordinary. Andrew touched on it earlier, like for instance, your firefighting equipment. I've been to a site where there's a firefighting device that's missing, an extinguisher that's missing. You go to the caretaker, you say, where's the device? And you know, they honestly, they didn't notice it was gone. So just take a walk around on a daily basis, have a look, see what's there, make sure that all of them are fastened with those little cable ties to make sure that the device is secure and hasn't been used overnight. I'm not going to get into the reasons for that because that's more involved with the health and safety aspect. But yes, it is important to keep not a literally a written asset register, but keep an idea of what you have on site and what should be there. And if you note anything, contact the portfolio manager immediately if you don't have contact with your client directly, which is the trustees or of the building. Moving on, lighting is important because it represents the service that you're offering on the site. If you walk around and you see a light not working there and a light not working there, you know, people are very quick to assume, you know, who's managing the building and has somebody noticed this and do I need to report it? So addressing lights is kind of like a double-edged sword. If you do it well and all the lights are working, nobody notices your good work. But if there's one light that's not working, everybody notices it. So it is something beneficial to get done. On the lights, it is also a good idea to at least once a month or once every 2 months to take the light cover off, clean the inside, wash them if you have to. Be careful, because on a lot of the older buildings, the light covers, you can't replace them or purchase them anymore. And if you break them, then it's quite a task to replace them. So, you know, take your time, be gentle, and just clean them, wipe them from the outside if you have to. But if you can, open them up, get all the insects out that are inside. Leaking taps. An ongoing problem, especially with water restrictions. I think it's imperative that if there is a leaking tap that's picked up on common property areas, that it's reported immediately to the at least the trustees. I would say, first of all, reporting it to the trustees, because usually 9 times out of 10 it's just a washer that needs to be replaced, and that might assist you in getting the correct tooling to replace the washer, and that would be very cost effective for the site as well. If you as the caretaker could assist your client, well, your employer, as to replace a washer, which could save them a 400, 500 Rand call out fee. If though it's not a washer, then obviously notify the portfolio manager as soon as possible, and then a quotation can be expedited or a strategy can be expedited to address the leaking tap. Refuse removal, for me, moving on to the next one, not so much a refuse removal, but generally the area where the refuse is stored. What we find on a lot of the sites is that many of the tenants, when they move out, or owners, when they move out, they generally leave behind 1 or 2 items. And I say the word 1 or 2 generously because it's normally more than 1 or 2, but mostly bed bases, bed mattresses. You know, those are the major 2 that I've picked up on all of the sites. And, you know, truth be told, we should be keeping a check on these areas. If you do notice that somebody is moving out, maybe security should keep a note. If there is security on your site, keep a note of who moved out over the weekend. If stuff is left behind untidily, then reach out to the portfolio manager with that information, and then the portfolio manager, along with your employer or client, can then work out what strategy you can take to either remove the items yourselves, or address the previous tenant or owner to say, you know, you left this behind, and you know, these are the repercussions. Weeds in the dry seasons are not such a big problem. Admittedly, though, I was at a site yesterday where there was a massive problem, and there was weeds all over during the dry season, which just shows how much groundwater there was. But generally, you would want to spray your paved areas, road areas, at least every 2 to 3 months, if in the wet seasons. In the dry seasons, you can do once before the dry season starts, and then after that you can leave it. And obviously that's only if you see regrowth. I'm not saying keep on spraying, but if there is regrowth, then you're just going to have to spray, or you can remove it manually. I'm not for poisons per se. I'm more into the greenie beanie kind of movement, but pulling it out manually is a very tiresome chore and can take up a lot of your time. But poisons is the shortcut if that's the option you want to take. The other thing with weeds is the moment that I spot a weed growing on the structure of the building itself, or on the outside of the houses, or whether it's a simplex or a duplex or whatever, or a flat, plants and vegetation should never be allowed to grow out the walls. This is a very bad reflection on the maintenance on the complex, in my opinion. If I walk into a site and I see a fern growing out the side of the building, for me, it's, you know, it's a matter of 1 minute, 2 minutes to get up there on a ladder, pull it out with your hand, and then apply poison or whatever. But it really needs to, that's a big one for me, is plants growing out of the building. An ongoing problem, moving on to the next one, with bird droppings. An ongoing problem in Joburg in general is I would say, the more indigenous species of feral pigeon that we have. It's a very interesting bird species if you know how resilient they are to where they've come from, why they were brought to the country, how they got here, how they've moved from the urban areas, and how their populations have exploded and the reasons for that. You'll also get into the fact that the debate around them is very divided at the moment. You'll find certain parties saying that no, there's no issues with their defecations, their droppings, their poop, to use a nicer word, but then there's other people who, and I've read literature where it says, you know, you can pick up certain parasites, you can pick up certain bacteria, certain viruses. I don't know so much about viruses, but definitely parasites. I was a pigeon keeper in my younger years, and I've seen the parasites that frequent pigeon colonies and how they spread. And there's definitely some form of bacteria that will manifest if there's too much droppings. So if you have 6 months or more, like a pile of bird poop in one specific area, when that dries out, it becomes dusty, and then there's spores that go into the air. Allegedly, it affects the elderly and very young people. So the bottom line is, whether that information is right or wrong, I would suggest clearing those areas as often as possible, because you'd rather be safe than sorry. I mean, that's the bottom line. And also, it looks untidy. So the sooner you can get it cleaned, the better. Electric fencing, not such a big thing. I think most of the clients that I've seen, they've been very vigilant in this, in terms of cutting away vegetation from the fence. Admittedly, in the last couple of weeks, I have noticed clients who don't have electric fences, but are allowing their trees and vegetation to grow onto the neighboring electric fence. Now, you know, the rules regarding where your vegetation grows, and if your tree branch grows over into the opposite side, it goes back to the meridian line, and that would be your neighbor's responsibility to cut it. But in terms of good neighborliness, it is advisable to keep an eye on that and make sure that your vegetation is kept on your side of the fence. And so your neighbor will probably notice that you've cut your trees back, and you know, you create good neighborliness by that. The other thing we've noticed is the electric fence suppliers. Sometimes when they're on site, they take shortcuts with your service, the service that they're providing you. So when I say shortcuts, I've seen recently where instead of replacing a bobbin on the electric fence, the wire was lying on the concrete part of the wall. Instead of putting like a proper insulation on there, they've literally taken a piece of cardboard and wedged it between the wire and the concrete. So, you know, that's also neither here or there. I've seen fences that are all along the concrete. Ideally, it doesn't look good, and number two, it doesn't serve the fence, and it doesn't operate as it should do. So your fence is going to possibly cause false alarms, and your security will become more laxed in terms of the amount of alarms that they receive. And one day when somebody does activate the fence because of a breach, your security are going to react in a much more slower manner. Just check your fences. Make sure that your service provider has replaced all the bobbins. They become frayed. The plastic becomes very brittle over time, and it is, you know, it's better to replace them now than replacing 20 in a year or two's time. High maintenance systems which require frequent checks. CCTV, there seems to be, most of them are working where they are on site. I've noticed at least 20–30% of the sites that I've been to, that cameras are out of focus. The quality of the picture is really not, it's not something that you would want to rely on when conducting an investigation. The other thing, and I'm not saying go and buy new cameras, I'm just saying if your service provider can focus the camera, maybe move it to a different location where you can get a better picture. There are a lot of options before you go replacement. Yes, cleaning of the lenses is also important. I've noticed a lot of sites that don't clean the lenses on the cameras often enough. I mean, that's a simple thing that somebody can get on the ladder, just wipe it down with some cleaning liquid, make sure there's no smudging or oil in it that will cause a reflection. But yes, just general cleaning. And then the line of sights. I've seen not many, but a couple of trees that have now grown over the camera. And it's getting like further and further across the screen. Where the landscaper needs to be notified or the caretaker on site, you need to go there, check the cameras, maybe once a month, maybe 3 times a year, I'm not sure. But you would know your site specifically, and you would know the vegetation that's growing there. If you have a fast-growing plant like a mulberry tree or something like that, then yes, obviously you have to check it more often. But line of sights, make sure vegetation is cut away so that security or whoever is monitoring the cameras have got a view of that line, of the fence or the wall or whatever it may be. Irrigation system. Irrigation systems are there, they work. I'm not one to judge anybody, but try and make sure that your irrigation system is set within the watering times that Joburg Water is allocated. So I don't know, I must actually double check. Sorry, forgive me that I don't have this offhand, but I'm pretty sure that it's still in effect with the dry season, that you should water between 6 p.m. at night and 6 a.m. in the morning, ideally. I've seen people watering midday. I mean, and I go to the people, I try and explain, try and water earlier in the morning when you arrive on site. If you arrive on site at your work at 8 o'clock in the morning, then the first thing you should do, if you can't water between those times that Joburg Water has suggested, then water as early as you can so that the water can get into the ground. Because if you water at midday, the water is evaporated before it's gone a meter down or half a meter down. So yes, the other thing with irrigation is make sure that your pop-ups, if you do have pop-ups, or if you're watering by hand, make sure that you're watering the base of the plants and not the walls or anything around it. I've seen a lot of irrigation systems, automatic irrigation systems with the pop-ups. A lot of the times, about 20% of the spray is facing towards the wall, which in turn causes damp and damage to the plaster as well as the paint. And that just leads to patches in your perimeter wall or your structure, your flats or apartments or houses or whatever, where you have to repair certain areas or leave it to look like that until you do an entire project for the whole complex. Security gates haven't been a problem. Most of them are maintained. Most of them are good quality. They are showing rust here and there where there is friction points, but it's nothing serious. And I mean, I haven't seen any gate where a gate needs to be repaired immediately or welded or anything to that effect. Intercom systems, everything seems to be working, everything's fine. Obviously, it's a vital ingredient to check and make sure that it is working, to take the responsibility away from the poor security officer on site or from the caretaker. No security officer or caretaker should be allowing access to people that don't be let in by the owner or the resident, whether that's a tenant or an owner. DSTV aerials, probably a big bugbear of mine. Not so much the actual aerials, but the cabling, the ducting that leads from the aerial to the house. This process is being completely ignored on probably, I would say, 80% of the sites that I visited, where a new tenant moves in, a new owner moves in, they get in a contractor, this contractor just installs it, and the owner's sitting inside the house, and now the DSTV comes on the TV or whatever channel they're watching, and they're happy. They don't go outside and check, has the cabling been installed neatly, has it been installed tidily, and at the end of the day, and after 1 or 2 years, that person moves out, they leave the cabling there, they sometimes leave the aerial there, and then the next person moves in and they follow the same process. And after a period of like 5 to 10 years, the building from the outside just looks terrible, in my opinion. So what I would suggest is, if somebody moves in, and I don't, this is a lot of admin, but you give them like a welcome pack and you say, if you want to install a DSTV aerial, you contact the trustees for permission, or if you know that there's going to be an installation, the trustees or the caretaker needs to go there after the installation and just make sure that it's neat and tidy. If not, the individual sites can make their own decision on whether the caretaker is entrusted with a couple of, those little nail-in, lock-in fittings where you can put the cable in neatly and give them a ladder and get up there and tidy up the place as a value add to the person moving in, or if they want to take it on seriously with the person via the portfolio management. But that's for your site to decide and for you guys to manage it. And the portfolio manager will be able to help with communication and conveying this message when the person hopefully moves in. Bathroom facility for building staff and any other staff on the site. So one of the biggest problems that I've seen, or one of the most frequented frequently reported issues that I have is security officers that work on the individual sites that don't have toilet paper. So this goes back to their contract with you. So their contract will say either the client has to provide the toilet facilities, which means the building has to provide the toilet paper, or the security company will provide the toilet paper. But this is something that should be negotiated with your security company or your landscaping company if you have those service providers for the bigger sites. But generally, you've got a caretaker on site and you've got security and a cleaner, which is an add-on to the caretaker. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because a lot of the times these poor guys are left on these sites. There is no toilet paper, and what they start reverting to is newspaper, cloths, I've seen in some cases. And at the end of the day, the client or the building suffers as a result. So with blockages, and then you have to pay to get it unblocked. So what I suggest is just, check with security staff, on a weekly basis. The caretaker can check with them. Do you have toilet paper? Yes or no? If they don't, then give them a role and report it to the security company and say, can you please supply your staff with toilet paper if it's part of the agreement. But that's respective to each site. Then one or two sites I've noticed don't have disclaimer boards on entering the site. This is not for negotiation. It's something that you should have, an indemnity board or a disclaimer board on the outside. There is a lot of liability that you can attract towards yourself if you don't have this visible upon entry. I have seen on other sites where the disclaimer board is hidden around the corner by the entrance to the stairwell. The board, in my opinion, should be on the outside of the gate area where you drive in. If not, the first wall that you look at as you drive in, it should be there in your face. There isn't really an argument for ignorance or anything like that, but you should make best effort to get that thing in the person's face the moment that they drive through the gate. And just to indemnify the trustees from any mishaps or any behavior that happens on site or any incidents that happens on site. Adele, that's that slide. Thanks. The last thing that I've been asked to chat about is a lot of the times the caretakers, I was taught something at the beginning, it was the middle of 2019 by one of my workmates at head office. He told me, you don't know what you don't know. And the person or the caretaker or the security guard or whatever you should always keep that in mind when you're managing humans. So what I did, I had an issue with a client, a site that I was overseeing or helping the manager get back into order. It was a very high-level site, and he was a very high-level manager. But I was sent there to first audit what was wrong and then get everything back in line. So what you're seeing on the slide is basically just a work schedule. It's a very simple document that I literally threw together. I think it took me maybe an hour or so to put it together. But it's just a template or an idea of what I would suggest doing with your caretakers. And if you are a caretaker, maybe suggest that your employer help you with this. Or if you have people working underneath you, like say you're the caretaker and you have a cleaner under you, or you have a landscaper under you, whatever the case may be, but definitely something that structures their day. So, this one is not an ideal example, but it is the example that I sent through for this presentation. You'll see the first thing that this guy did in the morning was to arrive on site and oversee the security change. So normal security changes happen at 6 a.m. in the morning. Night shift goes off duty, day shift arrives for duty. So he would oversee to make sure that the day shift officer arrived, and he would sign off and everything would be hunky-dory after that, and then the work would continue. They would then sit down and go through the OB book, make sure that there was no incidents overnight. Like for instance, in a caretaker role, you would arrive on site, you would engage with your security officer on site and say to him, what happened last night? Do you know? Because what's supposed to happen is when the night shift security officer knocks off, he's supposed to have a debrief with the day shift officer. Just to say, listen, last night there was a big party at Unit 101 or 102. I don't mean any bad negativity to Unit 101 or 102, but as an example, there was a big party and this is what happened, and we had to call reaction or we had to call police. And then that information can be filtered down via a report from the security company to the caretaker, who can then escalate it to the trustees or the managing agent directly. This information can be used in an investigation, and then action can be taken if there was any issues that needed to be sorted out. But let me not digress, but basically just step by step, hour by hour, you don't have to even go into so much detail, but the idea is that at any time of the day, you can go to that spot. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, you should be sweeping the pavement. At 11 o'clock, you should be sweeping the basement parking area. At 12 o'clock, you got lunch until 1 o'clock. And then everybody knows. Everybody knows. I was at a site yesterday and everybody was sitting around. And I was like, what are you guys doing? That's lunch. So I felt embarrassed. And I was like, sorry, guys. Noted. And I went back and asked them questions afterwards and stuff like that. But the work schedule is just there to make everybody understand their role and understand how much work there actually is. You know, a lot of the times when I sat and I did this, I actually realized how much work the guy that I was overseeing had. And then he had staff under him as well. That's why the report will talk about checking cleaning, checking security, the electric fence, and those kind of things. But yes, this is a very helpful tool. And then at any time, you can check where your staff is or what they've done and base performance indicators off of that. I think that's about all, Andrew and Adele, from me.
All right, thanks very much, Sean. I see time is moving on, so I think I'm going to ask Adele to continue directly, and we will leave any remaining questions to the end. So thank you, Adele.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. The next few slides that we will dealing with will be maintenance classifications. And I'm sure the caretakers and everybody joining us on the webinar has gone through it before, and they understand the expectation from their side in hand with our side, which goes hand in hand with the specifications that we need. And then we'll quickly have a look at the process logging a call with Trafalgar, and then the role that caretakers can play within the maintenance process. So if we look at this slide, we will see that it's important for us and for caretakers on site to be able to give us clear indication as to, is it an emergency or is it a planned maintenance? Planned or routine or day-to-day, as we've discussed. So if we look at emergency maintenance, we can classify or identify them with these three items that I've listed. So it will become an emergency maintenance if there's unnecessary charges. In other words, there's a leaking pipe and we will create additional charges if not attended to immediately. Just like I said, it requires immediate attention. There's definitely a risk involved in the sense that it's a health risk or security risk, and if not attended to, it can cause future damage to common property or a unit of an owner. So then we also know that we've now moved on the planned routine maintenance. That's more where we would require quotes. So that will cover projects, annual services, which we've just had a look at, and then preventative maintenance. So that is extremely important for the caretakers on site to identify in which category this falls, and we'll see why it is just now. So if I look at the next one, I just want to identify emergency maintenance which needs immediate attention. So the first one we can look at is blocked drains. Why? Because there's a health risk. It can damage common property and it needs immediate attention. That's an emergency. Generally, we don't ask for quotes. I say generally, it sometimes does happen if it's huge blockages. But this needs immediate attention and not quotes within 2-3 days. If we look at electricity would be something like a circuit breaker that needs to be replaced, a substation that we have a problem. It creates definitely a risk and it needs immediate attention. Security-related issues. Gate motors, which there's a problem with the gate motor, the gate is standing open. Electric fences, as Sean just said, that is down. It creates a security risk and needs immediate attention. And then the last one is just excessive leaks on common property, which can damage common property. Again, we say immediate attention. Why? Because there's an increase in the water account. So we don't want to sit in the end of the month, which with a huge water bill, if not attended immediately. So that is the 4 examples just with regards to the category of immediate emergency maintenance. It is important for us to manage the expectation in this entire process. So the turnaround on quotes and work schedule are service provider dependent. And I think that we always just need to keep in mind, because we are depending on service providers, external service providers from Trafalgar, to render these services. And then managing turnaround timing expectation from the outset is important. So it's for us as Trafalgar important that our clients understand that an emergency, if locked with Trafalgar as an emergency, will enjoy immediate attention. If we do get a request for a quote, and we'll just have a look at what items would need quotes, it's like routine maintenance, which will be between 3 and 7 days, urgent quotes, which will be 3 and 4, and emergencies, like I said, sometimes we do get emergencies that we need to quote on, but that will be between 2 and 3 days. But normally the subjects that we just dealt with, those would be emergencies and dealt with immediately. Then if we have a look at routine and planned, this is the areas where we get quotes. We need to get quotes from. So it will be our maintenance planning, like the big projects, the painting, roof sealing, that will be on our project planning. Annual services, Andrew has just mentioned the fire equipment, which needs to be serviced once a year, and the major service, which needs to be done every 5 years. We've chatted about the lifts and annexes, which we have to get a biannual service, and then the 60-day period, which we need to resolve the issues as listed. Preventative maintenance, cleaning of gutters that Sean just explained to us, which is monthly, cleaning of the drains weekly, and then if you need topsoil for your gardens. So you can see on these items, this is where our planning comes in, and this is where we as Trafalgar then can assist you guys with quotes. I just want to explain to our participants why it's so important for us to get detailed specifications or scope of the work. And it all goes hand in hand with what we just discussed on emergency, because you need to tell us it's emergency, you need to tell us what a normal day-to-day is it. And if we go back to the slides that Karine did for us in the beginning, we need to be able to know exactly where it is. So these 5 items is why we need you as caretakers to be able to tell us what needs to be done. And then from there, we will be able to give you quotes that we can compare, which covers the job's scope. We need to ensure that we send out qualified contractors in a specific field. It's no use we send out an electrician if we need somebody that specializes in gate motors, just as an example. Quotes need to be assessed and evaluated time efficiently. The party responsible for the cost is identified. So that again with the scope, and where Karine explained to us, is it exclusive use, is it common property, is part of section, so we can identify who is liable for the cost at the end of that. And then the contractor allocated to the work to be sure that he sourced the correct material. We will have a look now, for example, at this example where a contractor was sent to repair a roof on site, and when they get onto site, it's not a roof leak, it's actually a burst geyser, which leaked and damaged the ceiling. So if the specifications and the specs was from the outset correct, we wouldn't have had a delay in the incorrect job specifications, and there won't be unnecessary expenses. So we just want to highlight to you guys how important it is to whatever ends up with us is correct, and we know where to allocate the jobs into. So if we look at the process of logging a maintenance job, there's a definite workflow. So this will basically be in line with the emergency or your day-to-day quotes that we need to obtain. So a trustee, owner or caretaker will report a maintenance request to Trafalgar. We've got during our office hours, the maintenance can be reported via email, telephone, or we do have a dedicated WhatsApp line as well, where photos can be submitted, and then the specs of the specifications of the job. We also have an after-hour made emergency number, and on that number we do ask that photos is being posted, because it's difficult after hours, you know, to get the correct specifications. Those WhatsApps and photos is then forwarded to the contractor, whether it's during office hours or after hours, to do the maintenance. Remember, if quote is required, that will come in between. The contractor will then arrange access with the owner, and on successful completion of the work, the owner or the caretaker will be asked, or the trustee in that matter, to complete an internal job card. We'll have a look at why we have implemented a job card just now, and what is the benefits that you as clients in Trafalgar gets from the internal job cards. From the job cards that's been submitted, then we will receive an invoice with the signed job card, and the invoice payment process, which will also be covered in one of our modules, will then take effect and the invoice will be paid. I know I've ran through these slides quite fast. I don't know if there's any questions before we just do the last 2 or 3. Andrew? Nothing.
I've been answering questions in writing. I think I've answered 40 questions in writing as
oh my goodness.
So I've tried to answer directly and specifically. So none right now. I'm sure some more will come through. So I think carry on, and then we'll have a chance at the end to recap and summarize.
Okay. So from all of what we've discussed, I think it's very clear that the caretakers plays a huge role in the management process as such. So what I would like to do is just go through the cycle, because this is, you as a caretaker will meet the contractor on site. This is now after the fact that obviously you have locked the call, or whoever has locked the call. So you will meet the contractor on site. And it's important that you note that we said record the date and the time, and we'll get to the reason for that now. It's important for you to then direct the contractor to the site, because you would have established what the work is and what the scope is of the work. So you will be able to give them clear indication as to what needs to be done, besides the fact that it's already on their job cards. While the contractors is on site, it's always very important to check their health and safety requirements while they're doing whatever job they've been assigned to do. The role that the caretaker definitely plays is to monitor and to confirm that the work has been completed. And again, you'll see here we bring in, sign the job card, and you need to record the completion date. A lot of contractors on invoices, you would know, would charge per hour. So you can see the importance for you to record the date of when they started and when it's been completed. The confirmation of the job completed then needs to be communicated to Trafalgar and trustees, or the resident. It depends on who actually logged the call. So this is just the importance in the workflow, where the caretakers really do play a role in assisting, you know, the residents, Trafalgar, the portfolio manager, the entire workflow in their involvement. So I said I'll tell you briefly, I know we're running out of time, Andrew, why the job cards is important. So the job cards, I'll show you a copy of the job cards now, will give us a job reference number, the supplier which has been appointed to the job, the complex details, and then confirm the scope of the work, the timing and when it was completed. The job card monitors from a client's perspective, did the contractor attend to the manner, timely fashion, with a professional, was the workmanship of a high standard, and was the client the overall experience of the client satisfactory. Those job cards has been submitted to Trafalgar, and it's captured on our system. From the reports and the feedback that we then get, we do every 6 months, we meet with the preferred contractors on Trafalgar's preferred contractors list, and we give them feedback in generally on those 3 topics. If we do note that there's a trend of dissatisfaction from our client, we will definitely address it with the contractor, or he will be removed from our preferred supplier list. So that's the reason why the job card from Trafalgar side is so important. Just want to give you quickly an idea. So it's all about the little faces. You'll see this is the detail which I referred to, which gives us the scope. And this is the area that the clients will complete, indicated it is an owner, tenant, a trustee, chairperson, building manager, and caretaker. So that is our building inspection job card. The last thing, Andrew, I just want to quickly run through just to confirm the entire process, that the caretakers will play a role within maintenance. So if we take a block drain as an example, we will receive a block drain was reported to the caretaker. I always say it's good, not good. The caretaker should inform the trustees of the block drain. The reason why, at the end of the day, they will receive the invoice which needs to be approved. So the detailed scope of work will then be lodged with Trafalgar. Remember, we looked at the workflow. Again, just if it's an urgent, like a block drain, remember we now identified block drain is urgent, so it needs to be done immediately. Can done block by email, telephone, WhatsApp, as I confirmed, and it needs to be marked as urgent, so we can attend to it immediately. Trafalgar will then log a job on our maintenance tracking system, and because it's an urgent call, contractors will be phoned and not just emailed and an SMS, but they will be phoned to attend to the job immediately. And then we go back to the slides, which we've already seen. We set the caretaker to meet the contractor, record, very important, the date and the time, direct the contractor to the area concerned, make sure the contractor is compliant with health and safety requirements, and very important, you need to monitor the work. Once the work has been done, make sure it's been done. You can see the blockages sorted out. If maybe it was a leaking tap, make sure and test it that the tap is no more leaking. Then you sign the job card, which we just explained to you what the importance is of that job card, and record the completion date, a time, because those that's charged per hour, we've now got record of when they started and when they finished. And then Trafalgar then you need to confirm the completion date with Trafalgar and the relevant trustees. So that's just in general the importance and the role that as caretaker